Comment on the video, where are people watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. My name is Officer Nick Scout Nelson, and I've been patrolling the avenues and backstreets of Maplewood for the better part of 15 years. During that time, I've apprehended my share of reckless drivers, mediated disputes between quarreling neighbors, and even returned the occasional lost tortoise to its owner. Typically, my days pass in a routine cycle of writing tickets, responding to calls, and offering friendly waves to local shop owners. At least, that's how it usually goes, until the fiasco on Poplar Lane turned everything upside down. I still can't fully process what happened last Tuesday, and I'm used to the unexpected. There have been strange calls before, like the pet peacock that somehow ended up on Mrs. Jensen's porch or the mystery fireworks at midnight on Elm Grove Lane. But never in my wildest imagination did I think I'd be breaking up a confrontation involving a high-pressure garden hose and a fully trained police service dog. The day started in the most ordinary way, a departmental training session with the K-9 unit. The plan was straightforward. My partners, Officer Bradley Brad Jones and Officer Monica Monroe, would help our service dog, Max, practice scent detection in a residential setting. It was all part of a continuing education program for our K-9 officers. The training scenario was routine enough: hide a small piece of evidence around the neighborhood to simulate a real case, then let Max do what he does best, sniff it out and lead us to the target. We received the usual permissions and notifications to ensure residents knew we were running a harmless drill. Maplewood prides itself on community collaboration with law enforcement, so it's never been an issue. Everyone typically waves from their porches or occasionally steps out to watch Max sniff around, intrigued by his uncanny ability to find just about anything. He's a handsome German Shepherd mix with an unwavering focus when he's on duty. Around kids, though, he morphs into a gentle giant, accepting treats and belly rubs like any friendly neighborhood dog. But on that Tuesday, something was different. We turned onto Poplar Lane, making our way past neatly trimmed hedges and recently mowed lawns. Max seemed eager, tail wagging as he scanned for the planted evidence we'd hidden earlier. Then, as we passed one particularly pristine yard, seriously, the lawn looked like it came straight out of a landscaping magazine, we spotted a resident glaring at us. She was tending to a bed of vibrant begonias with the kind of precise care that suggested she might measure each bloom. That woman was a mess. Denise Dee Parker, and little did we know, she was about to set off a chain of events none of us would soon forget. What began as a routine K-9 training exercise in a quiet suburb spiraled into an arrest, a viral local story, and questions about how even the most tranquil blocks can harbor some serious tension. I've had to share this saga with fellow officers, and now I'm sharing it here. Because honestly, no amount of training could have prepared me for what was about to unfold on Poplar Lane that afternoon. When we first spotted Ms. Denise Dee Parker that Tuesday, I had the fleeting thought that she simply looked exasperated. She wore a sun visor pulled low over her eyes, a pair of gardening gloves stained with fresh soil, and an expression that screamed, "I dare you to ruin my day." Being used to Maplewood's usual warmth, I felt a twinge of caution. It's not often a single glance from someone can set your nerves on edge, but Dee Dee's tight-lipped scowl did exactly that. I was walking beside Officer Monica Monroe, while Officer Bradley Brad Jones handled Max's leash. Our mission was to circle the block, letting Max's nose guide us to a small pouch containing training evidence, tucked behind a lamppost. This was standard procedure, clearing each address one by one, so Max could methodically sweep the sidewalks and lawns. Typically, our biggest challenge was politely reminding curious passers-by to give Max space to work. As we neared Dee Dee's property, she lowered her watering can and straightened up, fixing us with a withering look. Her yard was immaculate. No stray leaves, no overgrown shrubs, just neatly pruned rose bushes and those brilliant begonias she guarded like precious jewels. Max, ever the professional, didn't veer toward her property. He was more interested in the grass strips near the curb, where we occasionally stashed items to test his detection skills. But to Dee Dee's eyes, his mere presence was enough to sound an internal alarm. "Brad," I said under my breath, keep Max on a short lead here. I've got a feeling we don't need any trouble. He nodded, guiding our K-9 partner slightly closer to the curb. Meanwhile, Officer Monroe offered Dee a polite wave, something we often do to reassure residents. No smile was returned. We took maybe 2 steps past her hedgerow when I heard a sudden gasp, sharp, like someone had stubbed a toe. Glancing over, I saw Dee brandishing her garden hose. The water was still off, but the threat was obvious. Officer Monroe raised her hands in a calming gesture, quietly saying, "Ma'am, he's on official business. There's no need to be concerned." That's when Dee launched into a tirade, something about rabid strays and trespassing K-9 officers. She accused Max of eyeing her begonias, as if he planned to pounce on them like a savage beast. While I've seen anxious homeowners before, Dee's reaction was on another level. She rattled off claims about disease, damage, and indecency, as if Max were about to commit a litany of offenses against her flower beds. Officer Brad maintained a friendly but firm tone, explaining that we had permission to be in the area for a training exercise and that Max was thoroughly trained. Dee wasn't buying it. Her eyes darted between Brad, me, Officer Monroe, and Max, as if calculating which one of us posed the greatest threat to her plans. That's when she demanded, "Leash that monster before he destroys my entire yard." My jaw almost dropped. Max was already on a leash, obediently waiting for instructions. There was nothing monster-like about him. He's a disciplined service dog who wouldn't harm a fly unless explicitly ordered to. To ease the tension, Officer Monroe stepped forward, badge in plain sight, and calmly restated our purpose. But with each word, Dee's agitation only grew. She fumbled with the hose nozzle, hands shaking, a mixture of anger and paranoia radiating off her. I tried to interject, but she slashed a hand through the air, telling me to zip it. It's rare that I encounter someone so blatantly hostile to a police presence in Maplewood. Usually, even the grumpiest folks appreciate our efforts to keep the neighborhood safe. But Dee seemed beyond reason. She was stuck on the idea that Max was an intruder, insisting we were violating her property rights. I recalled that we were well within our boundaries on the sidewalk easement. No part of us was actually on her private lawn, and certainly not Max's nose. After what felt like an eternity of back and forth, Officer Brad gave me a sidelong glance that said, "We should probably move on." We didn't need a full-blown confrontation that would overshadow our K-9 training. I nodded in agreement. But before we could guide Max away, Dee tensed up, and I saw her thumb flick the hose nozzle lever. My stomach sank. In a flash, water erupted from the hose, arcing in Max's direction. He jerked back slightly, more startled than anything else. My jaw clenched. In all my years, I'd never seen someone deliberately douse a police service dog. Dee's face, twisted with fury, told me this was no accident. She was making a statement. That statement would spark a storm far bigger than any of us imagined. The moment water splashed across Max's muzzle, I felt a surge of disbelief mingle with anger. Officer Brad Jones, still gripping the leash, jolted into action, reining Max away from the spray. Max let out a small, startled yelp, more confused than hurt, but a protective instinct flared inside me. This dog wasn't just a pet, he was our partner, sworn to serve and protect alongside us. Officer Monica Monroe, who'd been trying to maintain a calm dialogue with Ms. Denise Dee Parker, sprang forward, hands outstretched in a placating gesture. "Ma'am, stop," she ordered, her voice steady. "That is a police service dog. You need to turn off that hose immediately." Dee responded with a shrill laugh, as if she couldn't fathom how serious the situation was. She tightened her grip on the nozzle, water still streaming. "He was about to jump my fence and ruin my begonias," she insisted, each word brimming with misplaced conviction. "No one's going to destroy my award-winning blooms." I exchanged a quick look with Brad, silently agreeing that we needed to calm this situation before it spiraled completely out of control. The Maplewood Police Department has a zero-tolerance stance on violence toward our K-9s. In many jurisdictions, assaulting a police dog is treated with the same severity as assaulting an officer. Dee Dee, however, appeared oblivious to that fact, or worse, she might have known and simply didn't care. Brad inched closer. "Ms. Parker, you can't spray a service dog," he said, trying to keep his voice level. "You're committing a serious offense here. If you have concerns, we can discuss them, but assaulting Max is not an option." It was like talking to a brick wall. Dee Dee only scoffed. "Then you shouldn't bring dangerous animals near my yard," she retorted, as if we were the ones who'd set out to provoke her. By now, neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. A few people whispered in alarm, while others simply stared at the scene with wide-eyed disbelief. I stepped forward, gently resting a hand on Max's back to reassure him. "We're leaving," I said firmly, turning to Brad and Officer Monroe. "We're not getting anywhere here, and this is crossing the line." My plan was to retreat, regroup, and address the matter through official channels. But Dee Dee seemed bent on conflict. She abruptly switched off the water, then dropped the hose in a huff, muttering about rabid dogs and lack of respect for private property. That's when the accusations started flying in earnest. Dee Dee claimed Max lunged at her, though he had done no such thing. She insisted we were trespassing, despite our location on the public sidewalk. She declared she was well within her rights to defend her yard. The crowd of onlookers exchanged uneasy glances. They could see the mismatch between Dee Dee's story and reality. Max was standing quietly by my side, tail lowered, clearly no threat to anyone. Officer Monroe tried once more to defuse the hostility. "Ma'am, your yard is lovely, and we appreciate that you want to protect it," she said gently. "But Max is a trained service dog. He didn't set paw on your property. This was a training exercise authorized by the city. We aren't here to damage your plants or invade your space." Dee Dee's only response was a dramatic eye roll. "Oh, please," she spat. "I've seen dogs like him tear up lawns without a second thought. And you officers think you can trample people's rights just because you have badges and big dogs." She folded her arms defiantly, still trembling from her outburst. At that moment, Officer Brad stepped forward, one hand loosely resting on his duty belt. "Ms. Parker," he said, meeting her gaze head-on, "assault on a police service dog is a serious matter. We can settle this calmly, or we can escalate it legally. The choice is yours." For a split second, Dee Dee seemed to waver, her eyes darting to the growing crowd. Then she reasserted her indignation, pointing an accusatory finger at Max. "He started it," she practically screamed. "He was going to dig up my yard, anyone could see that." I took in a slow breath, fighting the urge to let my temper flare. From years on the force, I knew that reason doesn't always penetrate a mind consumed by anger or self-righteousness. We had come here only to run a training drill. Instead, we'd stumbled into a showdown that was quickly approaching a legal threshold. A few neighbors, sensing the tension, began filming on their smartphones. Dee Dee noticed too, her cheeks went red, and her bluster intensified, as if doubling down on her version of events was her only defense. The standoff was about to reach its breaking point. Little did Dee Dee realize, her actions had already written her ticket to serious consequences. And we were the ones about to enforce them. Nothing about that afternoon on Poplar Lane had gone according to plan. Officer Brad Jones, Officer Monica Monroe, and I had come to conduct a simple training run for Max, our loyal police service dog. Instead, we found ourselves caught in a surreal conflict with Ms. Denise Dee Dee Parker, who treated the presence of law enforcement like a personal invasion. Once the neighbors started filming, the tension seemed to multiply. Dee Dee, apparently realizing she had an audience, launched into a fresh wave of accusations. She claimed Max was unpredictable, that he had barreled onto her lawn ready to wreak havoc on her begonias. None of it matched what we or the bystanders had actually witnessed. Max had remained on the sidewalk, never crossing her property line, unless you count his nose occasionally drifting past the curb. Despite all attempts to settle matters peacefully, Dee Dee remained locked in her narrative. Officer Monroe tried reason once more. "Ma'am, I promise you, we have no interest in damaging your garden. We're conducting a legitimate exercise authorized by Maplewood's Public Safety Division. If you'd like to file a complaint, we can give you the proper forms." Dee Dee's response was to scoff and cross her arms over her chest. "A complaint? I'll do more than that," she hissed. "I'll take this all the way to the mayor, the governor, and whoever else will listen. You can't just bring a vicious animal through my neighborhood and expect me to stand by and let him wreck my hard work." Brad and I shared a look, frustration simmering beneath the surface. Dee Dee's portrayal of Max was laughable if it weren't so infuriating. He was trained to find hidden items, not tear up flower beds. He wouldn't so much as nibble on a stray plant unless explicitly directed, which, obviously, we would never do. In an effort to keep the situation from spiraling further, I motioned to a calmer corner of the sidewalk, urging Brad and Monroe to bring Max over. We needed to consult quickly on next steps. Leaving Dee Dee to rant, we gathered a few yards away, within earshot but out of the immediate line of fire from any more hose water. "We've got a possible assault on a service dog," Brad muttered, eyeing the damp fur around Max's ears. "She's refusing to acknowledge it, but it's on camera. Some of these neighbors probably caught it." Officer Monroe frowned. "Yes, but do we escalate this into an arrest right here, or do we file a complaint after the fact? The law is on our side, but usually we'd rather calm things down first." I nodded. "Let's try to settle it. If she admits wrongdoing and stands down, maybe we can handle it through a citation. But if she keeps at it," my thought trailed off as Dee Dee suddenly marched over, refusing to grant us a moment of privacy. "Why are you huddling up like I'm some criminal?" she demanded, cheeks flushed. "What are you planning?" Brad gave her a measured look. "Ms. Parker, you just sprayed an on-duty police service dog with water. That is legally considered assault. Right now, we're discussing how to proceed." Her eyes darted from Brad to me, then to Officer Monroe. "Assault? Are you people out of your minds?" she barked. "I was protecting my property. That's my right." At this point, a neighbor, an older gentleman named Mr. Clarence Hughes, stepped forward. He quietly cleared his throat and said, "Dee Dee, I've lived across from you for 10 years, and I saw the whole thing. Max was nowhere near your yard. You can't pretend otherwise. They're telling the truth." To my surprise, Dee Dee's fury turned momentarily toward Mr. Hughes. "Stay out of this, Clarence," she snapped. "It's none of your business." I exchanged a sympathetic glance with Mr. Hughes. It looked like Dee Dee was alienating her own neighbors in her bid to justify her actions. Another onlooker piped up, pointing to the smartphone in her hand, confirming she had video of the entire episode. The chorus of voices was growing louder, echoing the reality that Dee Dee had crossed the line. Amid the chaos, Max let out a soft whine. Officer Monroe stooped to give him a reassuring pat on the head. He wasn't visibly hurt, but any aggression toward a K-9, be it water, physical contact, or a threat, could trigger severe legal penalties. And we had multiple witnesses plus video evidence. Dee Dee must have seen the tide turning against her. Her bravado slipped, replaced by a flicker of doubt. She stammered something about having the right to defend her begonias, then tried to argue that Max had threatened her personally. But no one seemed convinced, and the swirling cell phone cameras left little room for doubt. Realizing there was no easy resolution, Officer Monroe approached Dee Dee one last time with an olive branch. "Ma'am, if you'll step over here, we can discuss an amicable resolution." But Dee Dee refused, crossing her arms tighter and insisting she'd done nothing wrong. At that moment, Brad reached for his radio, exchanging a tense look with me. We'd tried reasoning, we'd tried explaining, and we tried de-escalation. Dee Dee had shut down each attempt. The law left us few alternatives. By assaulting Max, she'd committed an act that was definitely not going to be brushed aside. Thus, the wheels were set in motion for an arrest that would soon become the talk of Maplewood, and beyond. For a few painfully long seconds, the street fell into an uneasy hush. Ms. Denise "Dee Parker glared at us with unbridled hostility, while we weighed whether this situation left any remaining path for peaceful resolution. Officer Brad Jones stood next to me, fingertips hovering near his radio, while Officer Monica Monroe kept a gentle hand on Max's harness. When Brad finally spoke into his radio, requesting backup for a potential K-9 assault charge, the reality of the moment seemed to settle on everyone present. Neighborhood onlookers stepped back, forming a cautious semicircle. They'd never witnessed someone actively confront a police dog, let alone face possible arrest over it. Dee broke the silence with a forceful stomp of her foot. "You're all insane. I haven't assaulted anyone," she spat, voice quavering. "That animal was invading my property, and I just gave him a dose of water to scare him off. That's not a crime." "Ma'am," I said, measuring my tone, "it absolutely is a crime to use force, any kind of force, against a police service dog on duty. And we have multiple witnesses verifying that Max was not on your lawn at all." She clutched her visor, yanking it off her head in frustration. "This is harassment. You can't just slap me with charges because I watered a disobedient hound." The corner of Officer Monroe's mouth twitched in disbelief. "Ms. Parker, he's not disobedient. He's trained to follow precise commands. We're allowed to be on this sidewalk, and we have city authorization for our training exercise. It's not my fault if your silly dog ventured too close." Dee insisted, her voice rising to an almost hysterical pitch. "He's probably vicious. I've seen stories on the news of dogs turning on their handlers. How do I know he wouldn't destroy my garden and maul my begonias next?" At this point, a uniformed colleague from the Maplewood Police Department, Officer Harris, arrived on the scene, responding to Brad's request for support. Harris took in the sight, neighbors filming on their phones, a drenched sidewalk, and Dee in mid-rant. With a calm nod, Harris stood by, ready to assist if the situation escalated. "Ms. Parker, let's try to keep this orderly," I suggested, though I knew the window for calm negotiation was closing rapidly. "If you truly believe you did nothing wrong, you can state your case through legal channels. But right now, we have probable cause to detain you." She stared at me, eyes bulging. "You're going to arrest me over a dog?" Officer Monroe, with infinite patience, clarified, "We're arresting you for assaulting a police service dog in the line of duty. That's the legal definition, ma'am." With an exasperated scoff, Dee started ranting about her membership in Maplewood's Prestige Garden Club, how she had trophies for her floral arrangements, and how the entire block admired her landscaping skills. She tried to paint herself as a pillar of the community, insinuating that we were tarnishing our own reputations by picking a fight with such a respected homeowner. Brad's voice cut through her tirade, steady and clear. "No one is questioning your gardening achievements, Ms. Parker. But assaulting a K-9 officer is not something we can overlook. It's considered a serious offense." Her shoulders tensed, and for a moment, I wondered if she'd try to run. Instead, she dug her fingers into the pocket of her gardening apron, fishing out a cell phone. She started dialing, loudly proclaiming she would contact her lawyer, her council representative, and possibly even the local news station. She insisted we were harassing an innocent citizen and trampling on private property rights. Throughout this outburst, the crowd of neighbors exchanged glances of mingled shock and fascination. A few openly shook their heads, murmuring that Dee had crossed the line. Some whispered that they'd always suspected she was too obsessive about her yard, but never imagined she'd turn a garden hose on a police dog. By now, the tension in the air was nearly palpable. Officer Harris took a small step forward, anticipating the next move. With a resigned sigh, Brad reached for his handcuffs. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest," he said, voice firm. "You have the right to remain silent, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Dee Dee's eyes went wide, and her phone slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the pavement. She sputtered half-formed objections, but any rational argument was lost in her sea of outrage. Harris calmly picked up the phone, handing it back to her with a grave expression. From there, everything proceeded in near silence. Dee Dee's words ran out, replaced by stunned silence as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. The neighbors parted, allowing us to escort her toward Officer Harris's cruiser. Max stayed at my side, tail still, ears perked, as though sensing that the confrontation was finally concluding. I felt a mixture of relief and lingering frustration. This entire mess could have been avoided if Dee Dee had simply heeded our explanation. Instead, her refusal to back down had set off a chain of events with real legal consequences. Yet it wasn't quite over. Arresting her was just the first step. We still needed to process her at the station, write up the incident report, and brace ourselves for the fallout. The Maplewood community would doubtlessly be buzzing about the gardener who attacked the police dog for weeks, if not months, to come. The ride back to the Maplewood station felt oddly quiet, considering the uproar we'd just experienced. Ms. Denise Dee Dee Parker sat in the back of Officer Harris's cruiser, her posture rigid, lips pursed, giving off an air of disbelief. It was as though she still couldn't fathom that her actions, spraying a police service dog, had led to her being handcuffed. Officer Brad Jones, Officer Monica Monroe, and I followed close behind in our patrol car with Max. Though K-9 units typically ride up front in a specialized space, we'd made do with the standard seating arrangement in this case, ensuring Max was comfortable. He dried off a bit since the incident, but a faint dampness still clung to his fur, a stark reminder of the confrontation on Poplar Lane. Once at the station, Brad led Dee Dee inside, while Monroe and I took Max to a side corridor where we kept a stash of treats and fresh water for our K-9 officers. As I stroked Max's ears, I couldn't help but recall the shocked look on his face when the water first hit him. Despite everything, he'd remained calm, never once growling or acting aggressively. It was a testament to his training, and a stark contrast to Dee Dee's meltdown. Officer Harris processed Dee Dee's intake paperwork while Brad took down her personal details. I joined them soon after, passing Max off to one of our K-9 support staff for a brief checkup. Usually, an assault on a police dog triggers a thorough medical review, but it was clear Max had suffered no real harm beyond a momentary shock. Meanwhile, Dee Dee alternated between seething indignation and tearful denials. "You're making the biggest mistake of your careers," she declared. Then, in the next breath, she'd sniffle and say something like, "I just wanted to protect my begonias, why is that so wrong?" Her voice echoed in the station's tiled hallway, sometimes rising to a near shriek. A few other officers peeked around corners to see what the commotion was about, only to shake their heads and return to their tasks. When it came time for the official booking, I stood by Brad's side as he explained the charges: assaulting a police service dog, obstruction, and potential disorderly conduct. Dee Dee's eyes widened. "A dog? You're really calling him an officer in your paperwork?" she asked, voice tremulous. Brad responded in a measured tone. "Yes, ma'am. Max is a recognized member of the force. The laws concerning assaults on K-9s are very clear." She shifted tactics, attempting to sow doubt. "Well, did he have identification? A badge, or something? Because I sure didn't see one. How was I to know he wasn't a stray?" My eyebrow twitched. It was a question so outlandish it nearly defied response. Officer Monroe calmly interjected, "Ma'am, Max wears a marked vest when on duty, clearly labeling him as a police service dog. We also verbally identified ourselves and explained our training exercise. You knew who we were." Her next move was to demand a phone call. "I need my lawyer," she insisted. "And I want to speak to the station supervisor, no, the chief. Now." An officer on desk duty pointed her to the phone area, and she stumbled over, cuffed hands awkwardly holding the receiver. We gave her space, though we could still hear occasional outbursts about police overreach and wild animals let loose on private lawns. Between bouts of cursing and bargaining, she railed against ungrateful neighbors who always envied her garden. It was clear that her frustration went deeper than just the hose incident. She seemed to carry an intense sense of injustice. The mention of envy hinted at some rivalry in her social circle, perhaps in that prestigious garden club she mentioned earlier. Amid all this chaos, a short man wearing a rumpled jacket burst through the front doors. He introduced himself as Aaron Parker, Dee Dee's brother. He spoke in a hushed tone with Officer Harris, apologizing profusely for his sister's behavior. "She's got a lot on her plate," he explained. "Our mother's in the hospital, and Dee Dee's under pressure to keep up appearances for that big horticultural award." He lowered his voice. "Please, show her mercy if you can. We understood that personal stress could push someone to act out of character, but the law is the law. Assaulting a K-9 officer goes beyond a simple lapse in judgment." I quietly told Mr. Parker that while we empathized, Dee Dee had crossed a legal boundary. She'd have her day in court to explain her actions, and maybe a judge would consider her circumstances. But for now, the best we could do was follow procedure. Dee Dee eventually ended her phone call with a bitter slam of the receiver, tears of anger brimming in her eyes. An uneasy hush settled in the station lobby. We had no desire to humiliate her further, but the protocol had to be carried out: fingerprinting, photographing, formal statements, and all. She glowered at us the entire time, muttering half-coherent protests about how she was the real victim. As the booking process wrapped up, we took a collective breath. I reflected on how quickly an ordinary training exercise could spiral into a legal confrontation, all because someone wouldn't heed a simple warning. And while the rest of the day lay ahead, I could already sense the coming media frenzy. Maplewood had never been shy about gossip, and garden club enthusiast arrested for assaulting a police dog was bound to make headlines. Ms. Denise Dee Dee Parker's arrest sent ripples through Maplewood practically overnight. By the time our shift ended, the rumor mill was in full swing, with locals swapping stories about the grand showdown on Poplar Lane. Some accounts portrayed Dee Dee as a persecuted hero standing up for her beloved begonias against government intrusion. Others painted her as an out-of-control hothead, weaponizing a garden hose against a defenseless police dog. The truth, as always, lay somewhere between sensational extremes, but one thing was clear: she'd committed a real offense, and we had the evidence to prove it. Back at the station the next morning, I found a small crowd of reporters lingering outside, notebooks and cameras at the ready. Evidently, someone had leaked the story. Maybe a neighbor's cell phone footage or a social media post had gone viral. They peppered my colleagues and me with questions about what had happened and whether an official statement would be released. Officer Brad Jones and Officer Monica Monroe kept a low profile, sidestepping the barrage of microphones. Our department's PR guidelines were strict: no comments to the press beyond confirming an ongoing investigation and possible charges. So we said little, politely declining to add fuel to the rumor fire. Meanwhile, Ms. Parker secured a quick bail arrangement thanks to an attorney with a reputation for taking on contentious local cases. She was out before the afternoon shift rolled around. Word on the street was that her first stop, after leaving the station, was to storm into the offices of Maplewood City Council, ranting about police tyranny and the unbridled menace of service dogs. The council staff, caught off guard, asked her to leave or schedule a formal meeting, which only seemed to escalate her complaints further. By evening, half of Maplewood had seen the leaked phone video. Dee Dee blasting Max with water, followed by a heated standoff with the three of us in uniform. The footage didn't lie: it showed Max standing calmly on the sidewalk, clearly not trespassing. Dee Dee's watery assault came off looking more spiteful than justified. And with the internet being what it is, comment threads exploded in heated debates over property rights, the definition of assault, and whether Dee Dee had truly believed she was in danger. My phone buzzed non-stop with texts from friends, relatives, and even a few acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. They all wanted the same scoop: is that dog okay? Did she really do that? What's going to happen to her? Each query reminded me just how bizarre this predicament had become. We'd gone from a routine training exercise to a local scandal in under 24 hours. Officer Monroe, trying to soothe the tension, proposed a demonstration event. She suggested bringing Max to an upcoming community day to showcase his K-9 abilities, offering face-to-face interaction so residents could see how gentle and disciplined he truly was. Chief Garraway approved the idea, hoping it might restore some goodwill. The plan was to have Max perform a mock scent detection, followed by a meet and greet where kids could pet him under supervision. Dee Dee, however, doubled down. Through her lawyer, she released a statement accusing the Maplewood Police Department of gross negligence, claiming we'd paraded Max dangerously close to private property without warning. She alleged that her reaction was purely defensive, fueled by a real fear that Max would destroy her plants and potentially harm her. The statement conveniently omitted the part where she voluntarily aimed a hose at a designated K-9 officer. As we prepared for the demonstration, my colleagues and I kept tabs on the legal proceedings. Dee Dee's lawyer filed motions left and right, attempting to have the case dismissed on technicalities, asserting that the sidewalk boundary wasn't clearly marked, that Dee Dee's emotional state rendered her incapable of forming intent, and so on. It was a laundry list of creative defenses, none of which changed the central fact: we had raw footage and eyewitness accounts of her actions. Meanwhile, the Maplewood Residents' Council scheduled a special session to address the uproar. Local homeowners debated whether the incident exposed a flaw in city policy regarding police training exercises in residential areas. Some insisted that future drills should only occur with explicit written consent from each property owner. Others dismissed that as unnecessary, pointing out that the city had long-standing guidelines allowing safe K-9 training on public thoroughfares. It felt like the entire community was embroiled in a matter that, in a simpler world, would never have escalated beyond a stern conversation. But here we were, with Dee Dee painting herself as a martyr, Max hailed as a minor celebrity, and the rest of us trying to uphold the law amid a swirl of sensational headlines. In quiet moments, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Dee Dee's predicament. She'd made a mistake, granted, a big one, but the ensuing storm must have been overwhelming. At the same time, a part of me remained infuriated. It wasn't just a random dog she'd attacked, it was Max, a loyal partner who only wanted to finish his job without being doused. We pressed on, determined to see the situation through to a fair resolution. If the courts deemed an assault on a service dog punishable, then so be it. No one in our department relished the idea of making an example out of Dee Dee. But we all believed that lines must be drawn, and she had crossed one of the clearest lines in police work. Part 8, almost equals 500 words. In the weeks following Ms. Denise Dee Dee Parker's release on bail, Maplewood buzzed with speculation about her fate. Some folks whispered that she'd go to trial and face serious fines or even potential jail time for assaulting a police service dog. Others believed she would broker a plea deal, pay restitution, and vanish back into obscurity. Whatever the outcome, her name became shorthand for an ill-advised feud with law enforcement. Meanwhile, Officer Brad Jones, Officer Monica Monroe, and I pressed on with our daily duties. The K-9 demonstration took place in the city park, where families gathered to watch Max show off his impeccable scent detection skills. Children giggled as they hit a small item under a tree, only for Max to trot over, nose quivering, and zero in on it within seconds. Parents snapped photos, smiling with relief to see a friendly side of policing. When we wrapped up the demonstration, a handful of residents approached to voice support. They apologized for Dee Dee's behavior, or for any misunderstanding that might have escalated tensions in Maplewood. At times like these, I was reminded of why I joined the force in the first place, to serve and protect a community that, by and large, respects the law and values cooperation. As for Dee Dee, rumors circulated about her job situation. Some claimed she lost a prestigious horticultural position, others said she left of her own accord to avoid workplace gossip. Whichever version was true, the garden lovers around town quickly distanced themselves from her, unwilling to condone her methods. Dee reportedly muttered about launching a civil suit, threatening to sue everyone from the police department to the local news station. But those threats never materialized into any real court filings. At least, none that we were served with. Eventually, the scandal's intensity waned. Another local drama, something about a contested city council seat, took over the headlines. Maplewood moved on, as communities often do, shifting its collective attention elsewhere. I filed away the official report, satisfied that the law had dealt appropriately with an incident that could have ended much worse. Still, I'll never forget the day a meticulously kept yard, a hyper-focused resident, and a simple K-9 training exercise collided in such spectacular fashion. Above all, I'll remember how Max handled it, stoic, disciplined, never once retaliating or panicking. He embodied the best traits of law enforcement: courage under pressure, unwavering professionalism, and a gentle heart beneath all that training. Sometimes, I reflect on Dee's meltdown and wonder if she learned anything from it. Perhaps she'll tread more carefully before confronting a police service dog, or any dog, for that matter. And maybe, just maybe, she'll realize that no amount of prize-winning flowers is worth jeopardizing your integrity or risking a criminal record. For my part, I came away with renewed respect for the unpredictable nature of this job. You never know which routine call or training exercise might explode into a headline-grabbing spectacle. But if it does, the best you can do is act with fairness, keep your composure, and trust that the truth will eventually shine through.